no lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle. Wake up!
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the last day of January 2014. Time flies when you're getting older, I guess. We were going to have Kevin Flanagan on tonight, but he's not quite ready to come on. He's kind of getting a lot of grief over in Ireland for exposing people in the truth movement for what they are. Shills, or Mick Shills, I don't know what you call them. But anyway, we'll start off tonight by following on from last week in Atos. Now, the opt-out forms. I assumed, you should never assume, of course, but I assumed all the opt-out forms would be the same, but they're not. It seems that every GP has a different one. So I'm just going to run through some of these forms that I downloaded today, and Alan kindly sent me one from his neck of the woods. So I'll start with his care.data opt-out form. I request that my GP take all reasonable actions to limit the Health and Social Care Information Centre from extracting my confidential personal information, as outlined in the leaflet Better Information Means Better Care, a copy of which has been sent to all households. Well, I haven't got mine yet. Anyway, please tick one or both boxes below. I do not consent to confidential information held by my GP practice being shared or used for any purpose other than providing care. Box 2, I do not consent to confidential information held elsewhere being shared or used for any other purpose than providing care. Now, why they couldn't put those two questions together is beyond me. It would make perfect sense to just say held by my GP practice or elsewhere. But there you go, that's the government for you. Right, okay, we'll move on to, I think it pronounces Gainsborough, Cleveland. Request for my complete patient record to be withheld from care.data. And basically just says, if you do not wish your full record to be shared with the care.data service, please fill out the form and return to your GP practice. That's it. Stroud, Gloucestershire, NHS England care.data programme. Request for clinical information to be withheld from the NHS England care.data programme. If you do not want your records sharing, please fill out the form and hand in to reception. I don't know. I don't know what kind of level of English the reception there's got, but she must be pretty simple if she's got to. If that's the best she can do. But anyway, question A: just fill in your name and address, basically postcode, etc. It's funny on this. It's please fill in block capitals. Of course, you've got to be that kind of fictitious character. But it's asking for your postcode, your NHS number. Two of the things that you don't want them to have, funnily enough. But there you go. If you're filling out this form on behalf of another person or child, their GP practice will consider this request. Please ensure you fill out all the details, blah, blah, blah. Okay, there are special codes that you're supposed to have to opt out of this stuff, but as you can hear, out of the first three I've gone through, the codes aren't on them. Andover, Hampshire. Please tick one of both options below. I do not want my personal confidential data to be released by my GP surgery for the care.data programme. Maybe somebody else's GP surgery will do it for them. I do not want my personal confidential data from hospitals and other care providers to be released by the Health and Social Care Information Centre, HSCIC, for care.data programme. Now, the Health and Social Care Information Centre has your information. You have to withdraw your consent for them to have it as well. That's very important, because I'm sure they'll just be holding on to it, waiting for some grey area where they can send it off to somebody. So that's all it says from Andover. This one's from Paddington Green. It says, information about you and the care you receive is shared in a secure system by healthcare staff to support your treatment and care. NHS England would like to link information from all the different places where you receive care, such as your GP, hospital and community service. Community service? What's that got to do with your medical record? To help them provide a full picture. A full picture of what? This will allow them to compare the care you received in one area against the care you received in another, so that they can see what worked best. Yeah, right. A leaflet, how information about you helps us provide better care, is available in the waiting room or at reception. And basically just tells you to fill out your name and address. That's it. So we go on to Chelmsford. Basically, NHS care.data opt-out form. I confirm that I do not want my confidential information being shared or used for any purpose other than providing me with care, except in exceptional circumstances. Now, what do you define care as? I understand that there are times when, by law, my GP practice may have to release information about me. For example, if there's a public health emergency. Well, what does that mean? That means if you opt out, it doesn't matter. They'll just give it across to whoever asks for it. So, Sheffield. Care.data programme opt-out form. Request for personal confidential data to be withheld from HSCIC care.data upload. I do not want my personal confidential data to leave the GP practice. Leave what, physically? What, walk out the door? I do not want my personal confidential data to leave the Health and Social Care Information Centre. Well, you shouldn't want them to have it in the first place. Med Confidential. Dissent from secondary use of patient identifiable data. And this is a letter that's been produced independently, which has all the codes on it. You can get this on the Med Confidential website, and it's possibly, I mean, if you're not going to use this form, it's good to have the actual codes, because you can then, after April the 1st, which is the deadline for opting out, you can then go and check your own medical records under Freedom of Information and make sure that these codes are on your documents to ensure that they don't get passed on to anybody else. So that's it, Med Confidential. I am writing to give notice that I refuse consent for my identifiable information and the identifiable information for those of those for whom I am responsible to be transferred from your practice systems for any purpose other than my medical care. Please take whatever steps necessary to ensure my or our confidential personal information is not uploaded, and record my dissent by whatever means possible. This includes adding the dissent from secondary use of GP patient identifiable data codes there. If you go to Med Confidential, you get all the codes there. Blah blah. It goes on. It says, I say, that's an independently written form. It's not coming from a GP, so possibly a bit more legally safeguarded than the GP ones. I think that's the last one. No, I've got one more from Peterborough. Opt-out form, confidential, care.data. Please tick this box if you do not want your GP to release any of your GP records to the Health and Social Care Information Centre for purposes of the care.data system. Now, the code here is quite simple. It's 9NU0. That's 9NU0. That's the code for that specific part of it. And part B, please tick this box if you do not want the Health and Social Care Information Centre to disclose to any accredited third parties. Now, what about unaccredited third parties? Don't say anything about them. Any information they hold on you from any NHS source, but there could be other sources, of course, not just the NHS. Please note that, in general, such data would only be made available to accredited third parties in anonymised pseudonymized, sounds rude, or aggregated form, and the code for that is 9NU4. That's 9NU4. And this one was quite interesting. This is the Health and Social Care Information Centre opt-out form. Now, I'm not sure if it's a standard one, but this is not the care.data one. But this says, I object to any of my personal confidential data from leaving the HSCIC secure environment. Well, you can object all you want. That doesn't mean that you want them not to do it. And the second part of this is even more interesting. It says, I object to any extraction of my personal confidential data from my GP practice unless there is A statutory duty to share the information, B, a court order, or C, an overriding public interest in disclosure. Now, again, you can object if you want, but what difference does that make? You're not. That's not withdrawing consent. That's not opting out. That's just complaining about it. Part A, a statutory duty to share information. Well, as far as I'm aware, the doctors have to hand this stuff over, so is it a statutory duty anyway? I don't know, I'll need to find out. Part B, a court order. Now, why would they want a court order? The only thing I could think of was if the police were investigating a crime and they wanted your DNA. So does that mean that the health service has been collecting your DNA without telling you? Just my opinion, I don't know. An overriding public interest in disclosure. And the first thing that came to mind on this one was you walk into Tesco's and they say, hold on a minute, you've not been vaccinated, you can't come in here. That's an overriding public interest in disclosure, isn't it? Because, you've not been vaccinated, you can't come in here. You might infect somebody. That's what I read into that, because I can't see any other reason for it. But anyway, that's the end of that. But if we move on to the GPs themselves, we can see that, just bring this page up, 40% of GPs won't even hand their own information over. So what does that tell you? 40% of GPs plan to opt out of the NHS big data sweep due to a lack of confidence in the project. Family doctors are concerned that the total, I can't even read the top of this, it's off the page, and constitution could be under threat from a major NHS data scheme which will see confidential patient records stored in a national database. A survey carried out for the GP's magazine Pulse has revealed widespread scepticism about the care.data project, with more than 40% of a sample of 400 GPs saying they would not let information about their own personal health go to the database. The care.data scheme is one of the biggest NHS data extractions in recent times. It is aimed at expanding the range of knowledge that health professionals and officials will have at their disposal when planning NHS services in England, or planning your demise, I think is more like it, and planning how not to give you treatment. When everything absolutely collapses and you're sent off to the camp to work with Siemens, I suppose. With the exception of some particularly sensitive patient information, including records of abortions, sexuality or criminal records, all of the computerised notes that a GP takes down in a consultation will be held in identifiable form in a central database at the Health and Social Care Information Centre. And you think they're not going to get your record of abortion, sexuality or criminal records? Of course they are. The data can then be bought by third-party researchers. Researchers? Researchers in what? That could be anybody. That could be me. Including private companies with identifiable information such as patient's NHS number, date of birth and postcode removed. Patients can opt themselves out of the scheme. Well, that's a downright lie by the Independent, because it states quite clearly on the NSCIC website and the other smaller health centres which I ran through last week, that your NHS number, your postcode are included as part of that, your ethnicity, etc, etc, etc. There's no doubt that you're going to be identifiable, that's for sure. However, privacy campaigners have raised concerns about the security of the data and plans to make identifiable data available to third parties if approved by an independent NHS confidentiality panel, warning that patients will not know who has access to their private information. No, you won't. So that's GPs won't even do it. So why should you do it? It's like GPs won't take vaccinations; they won't vaccinate their own children. So why would you do it? I know on that subject, I suppose, I've said it on radio before in Ireland many years ago, that anybody going into a doctor's clinic to get their children vaccinated, although I'm sure that not many people on this broadcast will be doing that, but they should take a form to the doctor and ask him to sign it, and if anything happens to your child, you sue him. It's as simple as that, and I bet he doesn't sign it. Okay, so that's that. So following on from that, I suppose, we'll go to the first piece of music, and this one was left over from last week because I didn't have time to play it, but it's quite appropriate really. When we were discussing Atos and Siemens and IBM last week and Microsoft. This is the Dead Kennedys and Kill the Poor. Welcome back to Austerity Reality Bytes Radio on the 31st of January 2014. Following on from last week again, I'll just finish off on this subject for the moment. I'm sure we'll come back to it. A great picture of this. There's no words to describe him. He's just an evil, ugly scumbag. Ian Duncan Smith on ITV Player. Tories blast report claiming UK benefits are inadequate. Well, I'd like to see Ian Duncan Smith lean on them. I think he might change his mind. I think we should send a petition, get a petition, or have him forced to live in a tower block in Brixton, and we'll give him a weekly allowance or food stamps to go down the food bank and feed himself on Tesco's own brand tinned pies and peas and all that kind of muck, and really cheap white bread, although it's not that cheap anymore. Make sure he has his vaccinations, because lots of rats around Brixton, I believe. He might need something. But Work and Pensions Secretary Ian Duncan Smith has dubbed a European report which describes benefit payments in Britain as manifestly inadequate and as lunacy. Well, he is a lunatic, so that's quite appropriate, really. And he's manifestly inadequate at his job. So the report by the EU Committee of Social Rights concluded that the UK failed to comply with its charter obligations because of the low rates paid in incapacity benefit, job seekers allowance and the state pension. Even the minimum levels of short-term and long-term incapacity benefits, state pension, job seekers allowance may satisfy the requirements of the European Code of Social Security. They are manifestly inadequate. They fall below 40% of the Eurostat median equivalised income. Make of that what you will, whatever that means. But Conservative Work and Pensions Secretary threw out the report. He threw it out. He should have given it to some poor folk to burn on their fire, maybe, claiming the government has made you great has made great strides in fixing the bloated and broken welfare system we inherited from Labour. The only thing bloated and broken is him. You know, that's it. Well, he's not, I mean, damaged, I think, is more appropriate than broken. It's lunacy for the Council of Europe to suggest welfare payments need to increase when we paid out 204 billion in benefits and pensions last year alone. How much did they take in taxes? You know, how much is he spending on weapons to go and bomb, women and children over in Syria, in Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq? They don't tell you that, do they? But anyway, that's that scumbag, Ian Duncan Smith. Really nice man. So where does that go? That goes to an article on... No, I'll tell you, we'll come back to that later. We've got something on eugenics later. But this... we were on... Dave Eden was approached, Community Press Group. He called in a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about racism within the police, and he called in because he just posted an article on diversity and how racism in the police when he was in it was absolutely abhorrent, and there was posters on the walls and all sorts of things which he collected, and I've seen some of them, and believe me, they are. If you put them anywhere today, you'd be arrested, and rightly so. They're that bad. But anyway, he called up BBC Three Counties Radio and made his case, and they took their time, but they called him back and asked him to go on live Wednesday this week. But then they had a bit of a second thought and decided to pre-record it on Monday for broadcast on Wednesday. So Dave went down on Monday and he did half an hour. And if anybody's heard his time on here, you'll have a rough idea what he talked about: the corruption within the police service, target policing, how it corrupts young officers, and that's basically why there are perceived to be so many bad police officers, because target-driven policing. And he gave the example of the police officers buying pay-as-you-go mobile phones, driving up the motorway, seeing a van or a car with a phone number on it, phoning it up. The guy or woman answers the phone. Police car draws up beside them with a video camera on, and then nicks them for being on the phone in their car. So, but that was a trivial bit of the half hour I gave them. Yet, Jonathan Vernon Smith, possibly a common purpose graduate, but judging by the way he talks to people, but I can't verify that, but I will try and find out. Put him on today. And when I say put him on, he wasn't even in the programme notes, which advertised the programme this morning. But what they did have advertised was a man being left behind from a National Express coach in Birmingham for a couple of hours, who got off in the middle of the night, and nobody noticed he hadn't got back on. And also, they were talking about organ transplants. Well, I'm going to come on to that next. But basically, what this cretin, Jonathan Vernon Smith, suggested was that that was perfectly fine for police to do that, to entrap people and have them act totally unlawfully to get their targets. So I called up and I said, well, on that basis, I didn't get on the programme. I hasten to add, not this time anyway. I put it to his producer. I said, listen, does that mean that the police can pull you over, throw a bag of drugs in the back of your car and do you for being a drug dealer? Or even better, throw a body in your boot and do you for murder at the same time? And the producer says, well, yeah, it's just a matter of degree, isn't it? I says, well, it's exactly the same. Never mind the degree, it's exactly the same thing we're talking about here. Pulling people over for being the mobile phone's the start of it. So, but that didn't get on, of course. But I did another story. I did get on Tuesday actually, when I phoned up. He was talking about this Ed Balls, that Bilderberger guy, talking about 50% tax rate on the rich, blah blah blah. So the question was, do you agree or disagree? So I called up the producer again and I said, well, that's not the issue. We're talking about raising taxes to pay a deficit, which we shouldn't have in the first place. So I did get on here and I put that to Jonathan Vernon Smith. And he tried to spin it round, and I just stuck to my guns. I said, well, you've got the Bank of England, which is a private organisation. The government's borrowing from a private organisation when it has the legal right and the responsibility to print its own money. And then he tried to spin it off into the tax thing again. And I said to him, well, look, this is 100 years ago or so. We didn't have income tax in this country at all because everything was paid by import duties. And then he just laughed, cut me off and said that, Neil just wants to print money. Well, what does he think's happening right now? What a moron. I mean, that's all you can say about him. But that was his take. Police can be as corrupt as they want as long as they get their targets, according to him. So we move on to an article which was in the newspaper today, which he didn't pick up on either. But that's not surprising, is it? Virgin Media secretly pays police for fraud investigation. Richard Branson's cable television company secretly paid for Scotland Yard officers investigating a multi-million-pound fraud. The deal has led to accusations that the police are now putting themselves up for hire. I mean, remember the word accusations. I mean, how sloppy are journalists these days? Under the terms of the contract, it's a contract, so it's not an accusation, is it? Virgin Media agreed to pay the police's overtime bill on an expensive fraud inquiry. The deal, agreed in writing, again, how can that be an accusation, also guaranteed the police authority a cash donation of 25% of any compensation awarded to Virgin following a successful conviction over the fraud, which was costing the company an estimated 144 million a year. Basically, guys were importing set-top boxes that they could watch Virgin Media on for free. And that was costing Richard Branson 144 million a year. Really? Virgin refused to say how often it had put such contracts in place, but said they were only used when appropriate. So they'd done it before. This isn't the first time, and it's not just the police they do it with either. Former senior officers and long-standing members of the Met Police Authority, however, said they had never heard of such deals. My God, they're blind, deaf, everything, these police officers. I mean, they really should be pensioned off and put on disability, sent round to Atos, have the benefits taken off them, and sent to a factory to work for nothing. Fair's fair. The revelation of secret payments comes amid a growing row over the pressure forces are under following budget cuts that have seen police officers' numbers fall by 6,000 in a year. So where's all that extra money going? Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Blah, blah, blah. Police can and do take payments from companies for special events, such as crowd control at football matches or policing of airports. No, the football clubs have to pay for the police. That's not a special donation or a special payment. That's the fee to pay for the police. Why should Joe Public, why should somebody who's no interest in football pay for that? And the police airports as well, apparently, for all those terrorists, that nobody's ever seen anything of. But it appears highly unusual for private payments to be made by victims in active investigations. Oh, Virgin's a victim. Poor Richard Branson. The deal between Virgin Media and the Metropolitan Police Authority was signed as long ago as November 2008, but has only now come to light following the conviction of 3 men for their part in the fraud. Blah, blah, blah. So the police are getting money left, right and centre. There's less police officers, so where is the money going? There's a freedom of information request, I suppose. I might get on that one tomorrow. Right, sticking with the police. The EU has secret plan for police to remote stop cars. The EU is developing a secret plan to give the police the power to control cars by switching the engine off remotely. That's going to really benefit road safety, isn't it? You're driving along, minding your own business, suddenly your engine goes off. You're travelling 70 miles an hour down the motorway. That's fantastic. I spoke to Dave Ian about this because it's apparently the European. Well, I'll go through this. The European Union is developing a remote stopping device to be fitted to all cars that would allow the police to disable vehicles at the flick of a switch from a control room. Well, they've had this stuff for ages because they've talked about it for years. The driverless car and all the rest of it. Why do you think they're putting all those chips in it? Why do you think you can't repair your own car? You've got to send it away to a specialist to have a look under the bonnet because you can't see anything. Confidential documents from a committee of senior EU police officers who hold their meetings in secret, no doubt members of ACPO are in there, have set out a plan entitled Remote Stopping Vehicles as part of a wider law enforcement surveillance and tracking measures. So it's about surveillance and tracking. The project will work on a technological solution that can be a built-in standard for all cars that enter the European market, said a restricted document. It's so restricted the Telegraph can get a hold of it. It's amazing. The devices, which could be in all new cars by the end of the decade, they're already in, folks, would be activated by a police officer working from a computer screen in central headquarters. So your car's now become a drone, apparently. I suppose they could make you crash. They could make you, crash and knock somebody over. They could do whatever they want. Remember we talked about them pulling you over for being on the phone? This is a step further, isn't it? They could do what they want with your car. Once enabled, the engine of a car used by a fugitive or other suspect would stop. The supply of fuel would be cut and the ignition switched off. So we're all fugitives now. I spoke to Dave, who spent a number of years investigating fatal road accidents. He was a fatal road accident investigator. And I put the question to him, I says, how many high-speed car chases are there in general? Because I think this is a Telegraph, but this is reported in other papers, and talking about this will prevent high-speed car chasing. And he said virtually zero. Well, remember all those programs we've seen on television, stop camera action, all that rubbish, where it's supposedly happening everywhere. Most of the stuff, it's from all over the world. It's about 10 clips. They just keep replaying them all over the world. Utter nonsense. But here, going back to the article I mentioned about the EU, this is a playing with your head. This is EU coming out and saying they're going to remotely stop your car, take control of your car, but at the same time, they're behind you on the benefits thing. Good cop, bad cop, but they're playing both sides. So there you go. So sticking with cars. Well, actually, we'll go to another piece of music, and I suppose this one's for Jonathan Vernon Smith, because it's the Smiths and Big Mouth strikes again. Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio. Just mentioned at 10 o'clock, Alan Taylor Shearer will be on, and he's had an interesting tweeting episode again with the same Jonathan Vernon Smith, who I have mentioned briefly. So I'm sure he'll be talking about that. Right, we talked about cars before the break, and I'm going to move on to a story which appeared in the Mail Online. Now, it's a pure promotion piece for electric cars. Car driven from London to Edinburgh for free, thanks to new network of electric charging points, but it did take 12 hours and needed recharging 9 times. A milestone in electric motoring was hailed today after a car was driven from London to Edinburgh for free. Only because Nissan supply the free electricity, because it's their car. All-electric Nissan Leaf became the first car to complete the 400-mile journey without spending a penny on fuel or power, thanks to a newly opened network of charging points. Well, the power comes from somewhere, so it's not free. Red Dwarf actor, blah, 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 who played Robot Crichton. I think he's still a robot. He's a robot for somebody. And of course, it was a comedy series, so he's having a laugh, isn't he? Set off from Marble Arch with friend and made 9 stops along the way to charge the battery. Now, each stop took half an hour to charge the car to 80%, and it can only go a maximum of 60 miles at a time. So there's a map on the Nissan site. If you look at that, there's only 5 charging points between, I think it's Liverpool, Glasgow and Edinburgh. 2 of them in Glasgow. 2 of them are on the east coast. I suppose it's South Shields or around that area. So it's impossible to do it. You can only go 60 miles, so that ain't going to happen. So that's nonsense anyway. But they show you this charging point, Electric Bay or something. And there is another map on the Nissan site which shows you all these points all over the place. But some of them are the ones that will charge for half an hour, and some of them take up to 4 hours. So, it takes 30 minutes for an 80% charge. And this is the percentage they've come out with often. So often. You can't find anything between 80 and 100%. But for 100%, if you have one of these special charging devices in your house, if it's 16 amp, it'll take 8 hours to charge your car. If it's 32 amps, it'll take 4 hours to get to 100%. 100% is only going to get you 60 miles. So, so if it drops, there's no figures, as I say, there's no figures. If you're driving along and your car drops below 20%, to get from that back up to 80 or 100, there's no telling how long it's going to be. You could be sat in a forecourt for 2.5 hours, waiting to go another 60 miles. It's just crazy, And another thing that's always puzzled me about this, even if it is 30 minutes, how big is the forecourt going to be? Everybody's driving about in electric cars. How big is the forecourt going to have to be? You're talking about 2 or 3 IKEAs, that kind of size, and everybody parked up. How big's the cafeteria going to have to be? What about the carbon footprint of all that, eh? Yeah, and all the carbon footprints walking about the place getting fed up because they're waiting for the car charging up. So, yeah, what happens if there's a power cut? What happens if you pull into the garage and it's got no electricity? You're screwed, aren't you? You ain't going anywhere. Because these aren't hybrids, they're just purely electric. So, they've got a little video on the site for this Leaf, and it's British Gas is using them around London. So the British Gas mouthpiece is on there. It's surprising how far you can get in a Leaf. Yeah, it is surprising. It's only 60 miles on it, 60 miles total. And I did see another report that says, well, that's the maximum. It's more likely to be around 50. And of course, they say this is free electricity and it'll be cheap. It's only 2p a mile and all this rubbish. Well, that's only 2p a mile, depending on how much the forecourts are going to charge you for the electricity for a start. As we all know, the motorway service stations are way above the prices they should be for fuel as it is. And of course, they're not free because the grants are coming from government. So we're all paying for it, whether you've got an electric car or not. And we're also being told that the country's, getting ready for regular blackouts every winter. So if you've got one of these cars, watch out, you're going to be stuck at home, mate, And a great quote on the website for this Nissan Leaf: "A car made for today with tomorrow in mind." Yeah, you get in the car today and you arrive where you're going to go tomorrow, down the local Tesco's. It's only like 5 miles down the road. You run out of electricity and you're done. So yeah, that's the electric car. But they said it took 12 hours. Now, if you look on one of the sites that gives you the routes and the distance of where you want to go, I put in Marble Arch to Edinburgh, and it comes up at 7.5 hours. So if you add the 4.5 hours where these guys did in the stops, that makes 12 hours. Now, I've used these sites regularly to plan journeys, and you have to add, on a journey of that length, you've got to add at least an hour and a half, 2 hours for traffic, because you're not going to be moving at the maximum speed limit all the way. So the whole article is just a pure propaganda piece from beginning to end. And, it's a joke, really. It's a joke. So, sticking with cars, a lot's been made of the smoking in cars with kids ban backed by the House of Lords now. Well, for a start, kids are goats. I don't know anybody that drives about with a baby goat in the back of the car. They can't even call them children. And I'm looking at the BBC site, the CBBC site. So this is on a children's website, and they show you a picture of somebody with a cigarette and the little baby in the back of the baby chair who cannot possibly be seen from the window. It's so small. So you know where this is going. Just remember how we started off here, getting pulled over for using a mobile phone. I mean, if you're smoking in your car and there's not a child in the car, you're going to be pulled over anyway. Because the police will say, oh, well, we thought you had a child in the car. And then it goes from there, Oh, you've got your mobile phone switched on. Well, that's illegal as well, apparently. So, yeah, they're pushing this to children on the CBBC site. And obviously try to get children to complain to their parents and all the rest of it. Now, no sensible parent would smoke in a car with a child anyway. The whole thing's obviously for something else, and that something else is you're not going to be allowed to smoke in the home. That's where it's going, obviously. If you can't smoke in a car, how can you smoke in a house? It's the same thing. They tried this in Ireland when I lived there. And basically, if a plumber came around your house to fix a tap or something, you weren't allowed to smoke when he was there because it was his workplace. That's where this is going. Except you won't be allowed to smoke when your children are in there, or even other adults. That's the obvious place this is going, and I don't know how people can't see it. But moving on, let's sticking with cars and crossing over into people probably killing themselves. Tata Motors' Carl Slim probably killed himself, said Thai police. It's always amazed me, particularly in banking. I'm going to come on to that. How these supposedly highly intelligent corporate bosses just happen to fall out of windows. It's just it's quite incredible. They never fall out the bottom window. They always fall out from 6, 7 stories up or 20 stories or whatever. This guy in particular fell out the 22nd floor of a Bangkok hotel. Just fell out. Yeah, there you go. He won't be driving anymore. And then we move on. City man falls to death from 4th-story window. Saratoga Springs. Kyle York, a man who loves sparsity, politics and investigative journalism, fell out of a 4th-story window Wednesday afternoon and died. Police said they believed it was an accident. Just like the last article, he probably committed suicide. They don't know. They just believe, or it's a probably. Nobody says he might have just been pushed. But there you go. And another one, JP Morgan executive Gabriel McGee in non-suspicious fatal fall from bank's London office. That was just yesterday, I believe. How can it not be suspicious if somebody falls out a window? I mean, they show a picture of the same building, and I would find it quite amazing if these windows actually opened because they're the full length of a human person. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But anyway, there's another banker fell out a window. And another one didn't quite fall out a window, but apparently he was so stupid that when Hurricane Sandy came through in the States there, he got up on his roof and was blown off and died. But it's quite incredible, isn't it? And another one. David, executive at scandal-ridden Italian bank, commits suicide. Italian newspaper La Stampa reports that David Rossi, head of communications for Monte dei Paschi, has jumped to his death. According to the report, Rossi fell from the window of his office. I thought he jumped, but into the courtyard of Rocca Salimbeni, where Monte dei Paschi is headquartered. So, another one. But nothing suspicious, of course. Nothing suspicious at all. Right, where are we going now? We'll go to Robert Greene's blog. He sent me a little thing today. This is just something I just wanted to bring up. The article's called The Violate Club. That's Violate, Violate. 10 months have passed and Scotland's Chief Constable still appears to be grappling with the complex question of whether or not those accused of rape should even be questioned by the Scottish Police. The Chief Constable's position is not helped, of course, by his political boss, Alex Salmond's breaking of the law in defying the Information Commissioner in his quest to establish the facts about Salmond's involvement in the Holly Gregg abuse case. That's virtually about him and his other ministers not answering Freedom of Information requests, which is, of course, against the law. It may well be that Scotland's lamentable record of having the lowest conviction rate for rape in Europe results from the attitudes of the country's leading figures. A symptom of the utter contempt for the plight of rape victims may lie in the existence of organisations such as the Violate Club, which is present in Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen. That's, for those who don't know, that's Scotland's 3 biggest cities, Glasgow being the biggest and Edinburgh and Aberdeen. The membership of this club is heavily represented by members of the judiciary, senior police officers, lawyers, politicians and court officials. Its activities are every bit as repulsive as the name suggests. Now, I hope you've not eaten, folks. Amongst other things, members are treated to displays of simulated rape and sexual acts between humans and animals. Now, the word simulated, I'd wonder. You know, I did take a look at the homepage of this club, and it was previously called the Hellfire Club. So anybody that knows a little bit about that should understand exactly what this thing is. The identities of, but this is the arrogance of these types of people. The identities of some of its members, I understand, would be of considerable interest to those who have been following Holly's case, and indeed to the people of Scotland in general. Some have even been unwise enough to pay for the club's facilities by credit card. So hopefully we'll be finding out exactly who these people are in the very near future. So I just wanted to get that in. That's Scotland for you. You know, Scotland the Brave, independent Scotland, all that nonsense. Yeah, there you go. Run by perverts. Right, so we'll go to another piece of music, and then we're going to move on to eugenics, I think. The next piece of music is The Stranglers, and again, this one's it's a very short song. It goes to Jonathan Vernon Smith, and it's The Stranglers and Shut Up. Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio. We're going to talk about eugenics now. This basically follows on from the Atos stuff from last week. And this is an article on Southern Independent UK.co.uk, written by a colleague of mine, Joe Scanlon. And it's immortality through science for some. Humanism, transhumanism and posthumanism. Humanists according to the British Humanist Association. This is how they define themselves. They think for themselves about what is right and wrong based on reason and respect for others. They find meaning, beauty and joy in the one life we have without the need for an afterlife. Look to science instead of religion as the best way to discover and understand the world. Believe people can use empathy and compassion to make the world a better place for everyone. Now, they believe people can use empathy and compassion to make the world a better place for everyone because they don't have any themselves. That's why they don't make it a better place for anyone except themselves. Point 1. Think for themselves about what is right and wrong based on reason and respect for others. The difference between right and wrong, rightly or wrongly, has been consolidated and embodied in religion, not reason. Where that religion came from is another debate, but there are certain things we do not do for the sake of it or repercussions. An inquisitive child is free to put its fingers in the fire, and it is reasonable to do so, never having done so before. But there are commandments, if you will, to protect your child from injury and distress. Point number 1 insinuates that the child should make up its own mind whether or not to put his hand in the burning coals, and that we should respect the rights of the child. I disagree. This is the essence of moral relativity, where right and wrong, good and evil, are merely relative and down to the individual to decide based on their own reductive reasoning. If good and evil are tossed out the window, then evil has won round 1. Respect for others is a sweetener added on to make moral relativity palatable to converts to humanism. This article intends to show that humanism leads to the ultimate disregard for human life, and the end result is a scientifically controlled dictatorship. Point 2. Find meaning, beauty and joy in the one life we have without the need for an afterlife. If the humanists want to find joy and beauty in life, then why are they substandardizing it? There is joy and beauty in life without tampering with the gene pool and mixing genes that don't belong together merely because they can, because the science is there to do so. I've had this argument with Christians, who are all for feeding the world with genetically modified food, and you say to them, well, was God's food not good enough? And they can't answer that, of course. Anyway, carrying on with this. Yes, we're given the fine excuse that the experiments on sickle cells and stem cell research will produce a world free of disability, but did you vote for these white-coated priests to be given the right to play God? Did anyone? Why are they standardising everything behind the mask of diversity? Why are they geoengineering the sky to cool the planet, which is cooling by itself? Why are they fluoridating the water supply and adding the other nasty chemicals to it? Why are they medicating us without our consent? Out of respect? Out of compassion? Empathy? For our own good? Why have all borders to disappear so we are merged into a world superstate? Why do we all have to be shoehorned into the same mould? Man, woman, black, white, adult, child, interfaith, interreligion, interdependence. The important bit here is inter. Inter means to bury. Human rights, women's rights, animal rights, homosexual rights, lesbian rights, children's rights are all politicised in a global attack on the individual. New Age environmental rights guru Maurice Strong put it to us plainly and angrily at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. When we're finished with you, you'll wish you had your rights of a tree. Humans at the top of this religion want our independence and freedoms buried forever under the jackboot of interdependence. The anti-religious humanists at the bottom of the Darwinian faith haven't a clue about this. It's not included in their indoctrination. As for the need for an afterlife, it's true that there's no nuts and bolts evidence to prove there is one. It's equally true to say that there's no nuts and bolts evidence to prove there isn't one. What is true is that civilizations are doomed to collapse and die out when they go humanist. Millions gave up their lives for religious conviction. No one died to stand by the principle of 2 + 2 = 4. But the former saved civilizations and the latter has collapsed them. Every time. It doesn't matter how intelligent the computers are or how advanced the space project, once the rot of moral relativity sets in, it's all over. See Yuri Bezmenov, Thomas Schumann, 1983 lecture when he goes into this in great detail. I would recommend people to watch that if you haven't seen it. He was a Soviet dissident who defected, and he was a KGB operative, and he was involved in the subversion of America. And when he got here, he was surprised that it worked so well. Got to America, sorry. He was surprised that it worked so well, so quickly. But he goes through all the points of how to do it, and we can see it all around us today in the UK as well. Point 3. Look to science instead of religion as the best way to discover and understand the world. Most of this is covered in the above paragraphs relating to point 2 above. However, what converts to humanism are kept blissfully unaware of is that humanism at its deeper level is itself a religion which plans to become the religion, and a damn intolerant one at that. Humanism and the New Age religion are intertwined as the plan for it is for a merger between spirit and science. We need to look at the words of some fundamental zealots of the humanist religion to understand this. Are we heading for a humanist inquisition? Will there be persecutions? You decide. A few quotes here now. Let us do what we can to encourage the multiplication of the races best fitted to invent and conform to a high and generous civilization, and not out of mistaken instinct of giving support to the weak, and prevent the incoming of strong and hearty individuals. That was Francis Galton, the grandfather of eugenics. Eugenics is a study of the agencies under social control that may improve or impair the racial qualities of future generations, either physically or mentally. Again, Francis Galton, who was the first cousin of Charles Darwin. What nature does blindly, slowly, and ruthlessly, man may do providently, quickly, and kindly. As it lies within his power, so it becomes his duty to work in that direction. In other words, tamper with genes, etc. Tamper with society, and get rid of weak people, poor people. Again, it was Francis Galton, 1905. There is no permanent status quo in nature. All is the process of adjustment and readjustment, or else eventual failure. But man is the first being yet evolved on earth which has the power to note this changefulness, and, if he will, to turn it to his own advantage, to work out genetic methods, eugenic ideas, yes, to invent new characteristics, organs, and biological systems that will work out to further the interests, the happiness, the glory of the godlike being whose merger foreshadowings we, the present alien creatures, are. Now, on that point, there was an article in I've lost it. Basically, it was stating that they could make stem cells and all the rest of it out of blood tissue, and basically inject it into people to change their organs and all the rest of it. So that's pertaining to that. That was Herman J. Muller, who was an associate of Sir Julian Huxley, the brother of Aldous Huxley. Sir Julian Huxley was the first head of UNESCO, deciding the education policies of the world at that time. And I'll come on to education a bit later on. Carrying on with this, the first century or two of the new millennium will almost certainly be a golden age for eugenics. Through application of new genetic knowledge and reproductive technologies. Now, that phrase alone, there's Bill Gates. That's what Bill Gates is on about now. Reproductive techniques. The major change will be to mankind itself. Techniques such as genetic manipulations are not yet efficient enough to be unquestionably suitable in therapeutic and eugenic application for humans. But with the pace of research, it is surely only a matter of time, and a short time at that. Now, the quotes I've given are back in the 1900s. The previous one was 1935. This one is by Glade Whitney, Reproduction Technology for a New Eugenics, paper for the Galton Institute Conference, Man and Society, in the New Millennium, September 1999. So they're well on the way to implement this kind of stuff. And I think I read this quote out on the G. Edward Griffin interview a couple of weeks ago, a week or so ago. You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. Just put them there and say, now, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social boat, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organisation of our society, David Cameron's big organisation of society, for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use to yourself. Now, that could very well be an Atos inspector talking to you. That was George Bernard Shaw, and that's on video, and it comes from the Soviet story. You can see that clip on YouTube. And here he is again. I appeal to the chemists to discover a humane gas that will kill instantly and painlessly, deadly by all means, but humane, not cruel. And he said that in the Listener, February 7th, 1934, right after Hitler came to power. And here he is again. Under socialism, you would not be allowed to be poor. You would be forcibly fed, clothed, lodged, taught, and employed, whether you liked it or not. If it were discovered that you had not character and industry enough to be worth all this trouble, you might possibly be executed in a kindly manner. But whilst you were permitted to live, you would have to live well. So again, this guy could have worked for Atos. He's got all the terminology. So there's a fair bit to go in this article, so we'll possibly go to another piece of music. And again, this one could very well be for Jonathan Vernon Smith as well. It's The Fall and Bombast. Welcome back to Reality Bytes, and in 52 minutes, Alan Taylor-Shearer will be on. And there was actually, before I carry on with this eugenics article, it's something I wanted to bring up regarding the police earlier. I sent a Freedom of Information request to Hertfordshire Police because we've got about 15 or 16 pages of names of police officers in England and Wales from, I think it's 2009 to 2013, who were convicted of criminal offences. And Hertfordshire was missing off the list, and coincidentally, their office in Hertfordshire. So I sent a Freedom of Information request off and asked a simple question, how many police officers in Hertfordshire had been convicted of criminal offences, and it came back as 14. I think there were 8 police officers, some PCSOs, a couple of special constables, and a couple of civilian staff. It came to 14 anyway. So they replied, and I thought, well, okay, that's fine, but what were they convicted of? What were the sentences? What were their names? So they replied today, actually, to that one. They're quite quick. I'll give them that. And they didn't want to give us the names under some rule that they've used, but every other police service has published names, so there you go. But anyway, what criminal charges were levelled at these individuals was the question asked. So the answer came back: 5 drink driving, 2 common assault, 1 common assault and attempting to pervert the course of justice, 1 obtaining and disclosing personal data under the Data Protection Act, 1 affray, 1 being in possession of images and photographs of a sexual nature involving children, 1 possession of drugs with intent to supply, 1 theft and fraud offences, 1 misconduct in public office, fraud by false representation, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. The next question asked was, what sentences were handed down to those found guilty of offences? So all I got back on this one was 4 times fines with costs and disqualified from driving for 12 months. So that covers 4 out of the 5 drink driving cases. 1 times fine. I don't know which crime that relates to. I'm going to assume, and we should never assume, but I'm going to assume that relates to the other drink driving case. And 5 unknown. So out of out of 14 charges, we only have 4 sentences which they're prepared to disclose. 5 of them they're saying are unknown, and the other 4 there's nothing. So I'll be sending another freedom of information request asking how don't you know what the charges were? Were these people the sentences were? Don't you know if these people are in jail or not? We're interested to find out if being in possession of images and photographs of a sexual nature involving children gets you a slap on the wrist, or possession of drugs with intent to supply gets you a slap on the wrist, theft and fraud, misconduct in public office, fraud by false representation. That means you're impersonating somebody. But nobody, it appears, has been jailed for any of this. So I'll keep you up to date with that one. Okay, getting back to eugenics. And again, George Bernard Shaw. He was a great man for the quotes. A lot of people in Ireland. I was just talking to our producer offline. I lived in Ireland for 12 years, and this guy's picture was on the pub walls, and people over there revered him for being this amazing playwright and scholar. But virtually nobody you speak to over there knows anything about his non-fiction writing whatsoever. But this next quote's from Man and Superman, which is one of his plays. The proof of the Superman will be in the living, and we shall find out how to produce him by the old method of trial and error, and not by waiting for a completely convincing prescription of his ingredients. So, in other words, they're going to genetically modify the perfect man, and the Superman will be them, and they're going to do it by just interbreeding, which doesn't work. Charles Darwin's family is the perfect example of them. I think 9 or 10 children, and most of them were some of them committed suicide. A lot of them were mentally ill, and I think they only had 1 that was normal, and basically not that bright anyway. But there you go. That's inbreeding for you. You have to look at the royal family, really, don't you, to see where that leads you. But talking to the royal family, she's poor now, so please send her a donation. Bernard Shaw again. What is proposed is nothing but the replacement of the old, unintelligent, inevitable, almost unconscious fertility by an intelligently controlled conscious fertility, and the elimination of the mere voluptuary from the evolutionary process. So, again, getting rid of normal people. Julian Huxley. Political unification is in some sort of world government will be required, even though any radical eugenic policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible. It will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care, and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake, so that much that now is unthinkable may be at least become thinkable. That was a guy who's put in charge of the education system for the world at the United Nations. The brother of Aldous Huxley of Brave New World infamy. Aldous Huxley, Brave New World Revisited, which is the factual version of Brave New World. The members of the highest caste will have to be able to think new thoughts in response to new situations. Consequently, their training will be much less rigid than the training imposed upon those whose business is not to reason why, but merely to do and die with the minimum fuss. These upper caste individuals will be members still of a wild species, the trainers and the guardians, themselves only slightly conditioned, of a vast herd of completely domesticated animals. That's the rest of us, the completely domesticated animals. So that was Aldous Huxley. And again, Huxley. And it seems to me perfectly in the cards that there will be within the next generation or so a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda, brainwashing, or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And he said that in 1959. And we're there, folks. We're there. Bertrand Russell, and I'll be coming on to some of Bertrand Russell's quotes on education in a while. On the whole, the Soviet government and the communist religion are those which hitherto have best understood the use of advertisement. They are, it is true, somewhat hampered by the fact that most Russians cannot read. This obstacle, however, they are doing their best to remove. Education, folks. Teach you to read so you can be indoctrinated. Bertrand Russell. That was Bertrand Russell. And this is Bertrand Russell again. Sorry, the page disappeared on me then. Impregnation will be regarded in an entirely different manner, more in the light of a surgical operation, so that it will be thought not ladylike to have it performed in a natural manner. In other words, women will be artificially inseminated. Bertrand Russell again. But I anticipate it is for future scientists to make these maxims precise and discover how much it costs per head to make children believe that snow is black, and how much less it would cost to make them believe it is dark grey. Although the science will be diligently studied, it will be rigidly confined to the governing class. The populace will not be allowed to know how its convictions were generated. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. Now, if there are any policemen listening, or anybody in the army, you're obsolete. Get that into your thick heads. They don't need you. They just need you to beat people with batons and shoot them with tasers, and in the case of America, with guns or whatever, until they don't need you anymore. Bertrand Russell again. The economic power of the father in the wage-earning class would be completely at an end, and the family would probably cease after a time to be biparental, the father being of no more importance than among dogs and cats. How many single parents do we see out there? It's been done. Carrying on with Russell. By diet and training, people can be made ferocious or meek, masterful or slavish, as may suit the educator. Look at the diet we're on now. Look how sick people are, the crap food they're eating. So we've been made meek, and those in power, the royals and all the rest of it, get the best of food, all organic. They don't take the vaccines, they don't drink the water, and they live till they're in 100, 110, whatever. There's no chance I'm going to get there. Again, Russell. There is no nonsense so arrant that it cannot be made the creed of the vast majority by adequate governmental action. In other words, they can make the vast multitudes of sheep believe anything. Plato intended his republic to be founded on a myth which he admitted to be absurd, but he was rightly confident that populace could be induced to believe it. Anybody who's read Plato's Cave, that's where we are. Everybody's staring at the wall and seeing the shadows behind them, or seeing the shadows on the wall from the light coming in the cave window. Or the cave entrance. And carrying on with Richard Dawkins, you know, that enlightened guy who's all over the BBC as well. I wonder whether some 60 years after Hitler's death we might at least venture to ask what the moral difference is between breeding for musical ability and forcing a child to take music lessons, or why it is acceptable to train fast runners and high jumpers but not to breed them. I can think of some answers, and they are good ones, which would probably end up persuading me. But hasn't the time come when we should stop being frightened even to put the question? So he's saying exactly the same thing as these cretins were back in the 1900s. And people still buy his books. It's quite incredible. Back to Charles Galton Darwin. It might become possible to synthesize food from its chemical elements, or it might, for example, be found possible to turn grass or wood into a satisfactory human diet. Feeders junk. It It is more interesting to inquire whether man may hope to gain any direct control over climate. There's your geoengineering. And that was written back in 1953. So that's how long they've been talking about this. Life in the crowded conditions of cities has many unattractive features, but in the long run, these may be overcome, not so much by altering them, but simply by changing the human race into liking them. I keep hearing people talking about London and how fantastic it is and what a great city. And I've been to a number of cities in the world and I can't stand them. I mean, I come from a city, Edinburgh, which is quite a small city and it's quite easy to get out of, but London, it's hell. I mean, I just do not see the attraction of it whatsoever. It's like some scientific horror movie. But anyway, carrying on. A tame animal must have a master, and that, therefore, though it might conceivably be possible to tame the majority of mankind, this could only be done by leaving untamed a minority of the population. Moreover, this minority would have to be the group possessing the most superior qualities of all. So the likes of David Cameron and Nick Clegg and Miliband, they think they're superior to us. And anybody with half an ounce of intelligence looking at those morons knows full well they're way, way below anybody who's got normal intelligence in them, because they're absolute cretins who couldn't answer a pub quiz question and couldn't run a newspaper stand. What they have is the right genes, apparently. And we're not talking Levi's. Oh, well, Levi, yeah, maybe. Who knows? Why cannot man set up a community like an ant's nest? With the help of recent and probable future biological discoveries, some sort of imitation of man of an ant's nest cannot be quite excluded from consideration. Again, think of London. Thus, the control of the numbers of the two sexes may become possible, and with the knowledge of various sexual hormones, it might also become possible to free the majority of mankind from the urgency of sexual impulse, so that they could live contented celibate lives, instead of the unsatisfied celibate lives that are the compulsory lot of such a large fraction of the present population of the world. If these discoveries should be made, and this is really by no means impossible, man would be able to carry out the sexual revolution, which is a typical characteristic of the insect civilizations. So again, we're not just cattle, we're insects now. And we're getting very infertile insects. And with all the plastics in the bottles and all the rest of it, the sterlins in the vaccines, the sterlins in the food, the sterlins in the water, they're getting there. They're making people uninterested. They're feminising the men and they're emasculating the women. Or masculine, yeah, whatever that word is. Anyway. Furthermore, if this caste, German nobles, had shown promise of turning into a breed, it should have produced better generals at the end of 3 centuries than at the beginning. Whereas, if anything, they had degenerated, this caste showed no signs of turning into a specialised breed. A more striking example is the caste of the Brahmins of India, because its purity has been preserved over many centuries by the religious sanctions of their creed. That's the caste system in India, where the untouchables and all those poor, unfortunate people just happen to be born into the right family, don't have the right genes, and so they're treated like dirt. Anybody that's been to India, I've been there many years ago. It's horrendous. But there are very, very rich people over there, including Mr. Pachauri, by the way, of the head of the IPCC, or the former head of the IPCC. I don't know if he still is, that climate clown railway engineer. And I think we talked earlier about the guy throwing himself out a window who was the head of Tata. I think Mr. Pachauri had a lot of money in Tata as well. And now one of its chief executives has gone Tata by jumping out of a window. But there you go. Carrying on with this. Present methods of warfare would not be nearly murderous enough to reduce populations seriously. And even so, they would take a nearly equal toll of victims from the unoffending nations. So after the war, the question would arise of how to reduce the excess population of the offending nation. It is not possible to be humane in this, but the most humane method would seem to be infanticide, together with the sterilisation of a fraction of the adult population. Well, abortion could just as easily be named infanticide. And I believe Obama, last year sometime, or possibly the year before, I can't remember, said that it was perfectly legal to kill a child up to 2 or 3 years old. I think it was 2 years old. So there's your infanticide. There's Mr. Obama, who who was in government with Hillary Clinton, who praised Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. And I think she actually accepted the Margaret Sanger Award. So there you go. That's the kind of people that run the world. They really do care about us, don't they? Carrying on. For example, there might be a drug which, without other harmful effects, removed the urgency of sexual desire. I think they called that bromide, did they, during the war? And put it in the soldiers' tea. And reproduced in humanity the status of workers in a beehive. Or there might be another drug that produced a permanent state of contentment in the recipient. After all, alcohol does something like this already. Now, you've got to wonder why alcohol is so cheap, relatively. Though it has other disadvantages and is only temporary in its effects. A dictator would certainly welcome the compulsory administration of the contentment drug to his subjects. Well, fluoride, I suppose. It is the main ingredient of Prozac, after all. To produce effects of these kinds, there must be a master, and the master must be above and not subject to the procedure he is enforcing on his subjects. The dictator could not afford himself to take the contentment drug, because if he did, his capacity for rule would certainly degenerate. Well, they are degenerates. But anyway, it always comes back to the same point, that to carry out any policy systematically in such a way as permanently to influence the human race, there would have to be a master breed of humanity, not itself exposed to the conditions it is inducing in the rest. Now, when you hear that, the first person that springs to my mind is Charlie Boy. That good friend of Jimmy Savile's, who has his, I think it's 60 or 600 farms in Britain, all growing organic food. His staff all dressed up in hazmat suits, all his water coming from wells, his food under polytunnels. He's not eating the crap we're eating. So there's still a fair way to go in this, and a lot more quotes to come. So we'll go to another piece of music. And the next bit is, again, it could well be for Jonathan Vernon Smith. That's a coincidence. It's the Sex Pistols, and it's Liar. You're listening to Reality Bytes Radio on the 30th of January. And there's only 11 months to go till Christmas, folks. Don't you just love it? Carrying on with this, these quotes, because at the end of the day, these people have told us what they're doing, and they've told us 100 years ago what they're going to do, more or less. And really, everybody needs to start paying attention. And I know it's how difficult it is to talk to people, but we really need to start just showing people these quotes. I mean, that should be enough for anybody, but then again, people just don't read anymore, do they? They're watching the television. But anyway, I mean, well, actually, just on that subject, if anybody out there wants to help out, get the word out, and they have Facebook accounts or Twitter accounts or whatever, if they can post all these articles and just get them out there, go to the Community Press Group .com website, go to sovereignindependent.co.uk, sovereignindependent.uk.co.uk, and just grab any articles you want from there and send them out far and wide. And it seems to be the only way to get the word out nowadays, because people won't talk to you anymore. But they might see something on Facebook, who knows. Anyway, we'll carry on with this. And we're still on Bertrand Russell. He was an evil SOB. But anyway, one of the triumphs of our own golden age has been that slavery has been abolished over a great part of the earth. It's difficult to see how this condition can be maintained in the hard world of the future with its starving margins. And it is to be feared that all too often a fraction of humanity will have to live in a state which, whatever it may be called, will be indistinguishable from slavery. Well, I think we all know full well we're slaves. I think you have to wait long for that to come back into fashion in certain circles. But anyway, point 4. Believe people can use empathy and compassion to make the world a better place for everyone. Having read through the above quotations springing from point 3 from humanists themselves, the question here is, where is the compassion and empathy for all the human cattle, slaves and ants within the great orchestrated human stud farm called planet Earth? The world is to become a better place, but for whom and how? Certainly not for everyone. Well, perhaps everyone that's left over once the troublemakers and nonconformists have been culled from the herd. Bertrand Russell again. On those rare occasions when a boy or girl who has passed the age at which is usual to determine social status shows such marked ability as to seem the intellectual equal of the rulers, a difficult situation will arise, requiring serious consideration. If the youth is content to abandon his previous associates and to throw in his lot wholeheartedly with the rulers, he may, after suitable tests, be promoted. But if he shows any regrettable solidarity with his previous associates, the rulers will reluctantly conclude that there is nothing to be done with him except to send him to the lethal chamber before his ill-disciplined intelligence has had time to spread revolt. This will be a painful duty to the rulers, but I think they will not shrink from performing it. Now, that says they're scared of ordinary people being intelligent and spreading revolt. That's what we need to do, folks. We need to get the word out to everybody, and they can take from it what they'll take from it, but we've got to get the word out to them anyway. It doesn't matter how bright or whatever they are. Something's going to happen to these people eventually that makes them realise somewhere down the line that little snippet of information they heard a year ago or whatever was actually true, and at that point they might actually start thinking for themselves. So, according to the elite humanists alone, including the lesser humanists in the Darwinian pecking order, will be exterminated, even those who are the intellectual equal of the rulers. If they don't toe the line, should they be smart enough to work out that humanism is a materialist cult, adhering rigidly to the survival of the fittest doctrine, their lives will be extinguished. Where's the empathy and compassion in that, and what kind of better place would the world be under such an inquisitional dictatorship playing God? Behind all the linguistic gymnastics, humanism and New Ageism both believe that man can become God in this life. However, the lower disciples of these cults are not aware of this usually. Both cults are in bed together and are rooted in eugenics and depopulation, although those names keep changing to prevent people with a survival instinct expressing any righteous indignation. Another quote. Out of the full spectrum of human personality, 1/4 is electing to transcend, 1/4 is ready to so choose, given the example of one other. 1/4 is resistant to election. They are unattracted by life ever evolving. 1/4 is destructive. They are born angry with God. They are defective seeds. They have always been defective seeds. In the past, they were permitted to die a natural death. We, the elders, have been patiently waiting until the very last moment before the quantum transformation to take action to cut out this corrupted and corrupting element in the body of humanity. It is like watching a cancer grow. Now as we approach the quantum shift from creature human to co-creative human, the human who is an inheritor of godlike powers, the destructive 1/4 must be eliminated from the social body. We have no choice, dearly beloved. But fortunately you, dearly beloveds, are not responsible for this act. We are. We are in charge of God's selection process for planet Earth. He selects, we destroy. We are the riders of the pale horse, death. We come to bring death to those who are unable to know God. The riders of the pale horse are about to pass among you. Grim reapers, they will separate the wheat from the chaff. This is the most painful period in the history of humanity. Futurist New Age guru Barbara Max Hubbard, who wanted to create a Department of Peace. This leads us to the next step in the humanist ladder, transhumanism. However, before we... I suppose some of those bankers possibly went up the transhumanist ladder and fell out the window. However, before we enter the transhumanist world, let us bear in mind what Charles Galton, Darwin and co. said, that the upper caste will not be altering themselves under any circumstances, as that would lower their evolutionary godhood brought about by endless generations of superior interbreeding. Any altering that will be done by them to the domestic herd of humans below them. A domesticated herd of humans below them. This herd is being trained to believe that a human is nothing more than a glorified domesticated animal. Furthermore, to allow that humans to continue living long would retard the evolution of the superhuman aspiring to be a god. The farmer must retain his wild qualities. This is the essence of Darwinism taught in just about every school and university. The ugly face of eugenics hides behind many new and ever-changing names such as genetics, bioethics, and transhumanism. Transhumanism is the upgrading of lower-bred humans into a more efficient and productive slave using science and technology. This includes the social and political sciences. Academics are the last to be told this. They take the funding and chase their papers and careers. Transhumanism is normalised through Hollywood, TV and the media in the form of harmless entertainment, particularly through science fiction, comedy, music and drama, concocted by the Futurist Society and other think tanks. Now, if anyone saw the videos from the Grammy Awards earlier this week, and I think it was Daft Punk got some kind of award, and the photograph in the Telegraph was they were sitting in a pyramid, and they were between the main body of the pyramid, and the capstone was above their heads. And then you clicked on the article, and it took you to another picture where they were basically robots. One of them was given the pyramid sign with his hands, and the other one was given the devil's horn with his robotic hand. It's really quite childish when you think about it, but that's these people are morons, really. But anyway, there is a sinister agenda behind all this, which is to gently introduce an otherwise horrifying idea into the community, so that when the real nightmare appears in the community, it will be more familiar and more palatable. On the agenda are such things as life extension, for some, gender neutrality, that's androgyny, linking the brain to computers, super soldiers, super intelligent computers, and ultimately the ability to live forever in physical form through science. Those who are not enthralled and transfixed by the snare of entertainment can sense the oppressive regime behind the whole circus. Then we have posthumanism. Posthumanism is a merging of technologies to the extent that the old-fashioned human is obsolete. When the machine becomes more efficient than the human they say we are, posthuman. This process is known as the singularity. Still, as mentioned earlier, what we are told is that those playing God will not be tampering with themselves in any way through technologies, social sciences, or through any other means, as that would diminish them and their own utopian plans for the future. For them to become superhuman, we lesser animals are to become posthuman and serve them, otherwise we are deemed a drag on their evolution. This is all part of the religion. Those who would be gods. It should be obvious by now that just about everything in the above four planks of humanism, transhumanism, posthumanism spell out hypocrisy, letter by letter. It's all about eliminating any god from the equation to start with a clean slate in order to become a god yourself using science and logic. Over 40 years of barefaced lies about global warming, this has done irreparable damage to any genuine scientific ethic, not to mention the lies about peak oil and overpopulation. The media lies by omission about chemtrails. A god has power over life and death, over the weather, the soil, the water, and the creatures living upon the earth, including humans. There's all the poor dumb animals out there, including dumb humans. We've got to accept this and not be insulted by it. All the experts and specialists know what's best for us. We don't need thinking. The gods of science will do that for us. Immortality. Death is a problem. Death is a problem that the gods of science will solve for us. Then we can all live forever. Forgive me for the sin of thinking, but doesn't that mean that some of us domesticated farm animals will have to be used for spare parts and upgraded or culled so that the physical gods can transcend their problem with death? Isn't everlasting life only reserved for the select few upper crust world controllers? Otherwise, wouldn't there be a real overpopulation problem, whereas now there's just an overpopulation lie? Forgive me for the sin of thinking, but isn't the perpetual war of divide and rule between men, women, religions, adults, children, animals, environments, trees, all underpinned by a religion which has the common purpose of reducing the human herd from 7 billion to 500 million and using the remainder of us as tools and spare parts as they evolve to immortality? Aren't the defective, useless eaters to be scrapped? Forgive me, but aren't all the counterfeit grassroots movements a mask to hide the fact that we are being used as fodder to perfect the family inbreeding of the elites as they evolve towards godhood? Isn't their common enemy mankind itself, us? And that famous quote that I always show to greenies, and which proves that they made the whole global warming crap up. The common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behaviour that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. Welcome to Agenda 21. Here's the key point. The ones who run the Agenda 21 that is, do believe in an afterlife themselves. They believe in the evolutionary reincarnation, that they have evolved beyond the lower animal stage, that they are the fitter survivors in the pecking order who have bludgeoned their way to the top over millions of years as they control the money supply which we slaves are all dependent on. They believe that we are a drag on their evolution. In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. Prince Philip. Well, I wish he'd start with himself. You know, if he's really sincere, him, his wife, his family, the whole lot of those parasites could go down to Dover and jump off a cliff, and then I'll think about it. And won't do it. They believe that we mere mortals, when we die, sink back into that great primordial blank soup from whence we came, and we must be trained to believe this at all costs for our own good while they go on surviving. But this is not enough for them. These psychopaths want the option of immortality in the physical world as well. It seems they want to perfect their family inbreeding so that the offspring will not have the genetic defects or deformities as a result of that inbreeding, and are using us chattel as guinea pigs to get the formula right. Genetics is yet another word for eugenics. Eugenics, according to them, is the religion of the future, and an intolerant religion at that. Isn't that what the 10 humanist New Age Georgia Guidestone commandments have written and blazoned for us all to see on gigantic tablets of stone in languages to suit all races and religions? The messages of the Georgia Guidestones: maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity, unite humanity with a living new language, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. That's the joke, isn't it? Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Yeah, and we're off invading other countries at the drop of a feather, never mind the whole hat. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Really? Balance personal rights with social duties. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Anybody that's watched Soylent Green, the original name for that movie was called Make Room, Make Room. Let me leave you hanging on this thoughtful paradox. God help us if all the atheists are right. So, yeah, and he's finished off by saying eugenics suck. And he's right. So, what have we got? We've got 15 minutes to go. We'll go to one more song, and Jim was asking about education. I've got a few more quotes on education as well. And we'll come back with that. So the next song is Stereolab, and going back to the electric cars, it's called Super Electric. And they better be super because they ain't going very far. Okay, we've got 10 minutes to go. I've got some more quotes to read out from Mr. Russell again on education, which I dug out today. As we're being told that our children have to be in school for well, I've no school-age children anymore, but you know, children have to be in school for 45 hours a week. Yet the adult working week is supposed to be between 37.5 and 39 hours legally, apparently. But it's okay for your children to be in school for another 6 or 7 hours. That's fine. Obviously, they're just getting them ready for the slavery of the future. But yeah, longer school days and shorter holidays are the perfect election promise to win votes for the Conservatives from stressed parents juggling work and childcare. A former top advisor to David Cameron has suggested. Oh, God. Paul Kirby, the former head of policy development at Number 10, posted a personal blog. What a genius. Setting a big increase in the amount of time people spend at school, which he described as a real game changer in education. Yeah, you're going to make them education junkies, and they won't be children anymore. They'll be sitting in a classroom surrounded with Wi-Fi, getting their organs fried and getting sterilised at the same time. So that's what's in store for the children of the future. I and mentioned the Wi-Fi. The campaign is kind of getting on. I got in touch with a school in Northern Ireland where Walter Graham stays, and he knew of the headmaster there. The headmaster actually went along to a talk he gave in Stormont, the Northern Irish Parliament, and he went home, took the Wi-Fi out of his own house, and went to the school and took it out as well, which was back in 2008. So I phoned up the school in Ballinderry, I think it was, and spoke to a lady there, and the principal's changed. It's a lady now. I didn't speak to her, but the secretary, I think it was, said that they'd been forced to put Wi-Fi back in because a company called C2K had approached them and offered them free laptops, and these laptops had no facility to be connected by wire. So they took Wi-Fi back again just back in September. So they've sold themselves out for free laptops for the children, and you know the children are going to get fried. So I'll be phoning up again and asking that headmistress who made that decision, and I think Walter's going to get onto them as well. So we'll keep you up to date with that. But education, yeah, we've only got 5 minutes to go before Alan comes on, so I'll quickly go through these. Okay, Bertrand Russell on state education as propaganda. Elementary education in all advanced countries is in the hands of the state. Some of the things taught are known to be false by the officials who prescribe them, and many others are known to be false, or at any rate very doubtful by every unprejudiced person. Education camouflaging democracy. Meanwhile, the whole machinery of the state in all the different countries is turned on to making defenceless children believe absurd propositions, the effect of which is to make them willing to die in defence of sinister interests under the impression that they are fighting for truth and right. Join the army, folks. That's what you get. BS. There is only one of the countless ways in which education is designed, not to give true knowledge, but to make the people pliable to the will of their masters. Without an elaborate system of deceit in the elementary schools, it would be impossible to preserve the camouflage of democracy. That's why they've got to get them in schools a bit longer, folks. They've got to make sure they get indoctrinated well. Making people educated, in inverted commas, in public education is undesirable. It must not be supposed that the officials in charge of education desire the young to become educated. On the contrary, their problem is to impart information without imparting intelligence. Education should have two objects. First, to give definite knowledge, reading and writing, languages and mathematics, and so on. Secondly, to create those mental habits which will enable people to acquire knowledge and form sound judgments for themselves. The first of these we may call information, the second intelligence. The utility of information is admitted practically as well as theoretically. Without a literate population, a modern state is impossible. No, they need you to be able to read the manuals to operate the machines. That's what that is. And to fill in their forms. But the utility of intelligence is admitted only theoretically, not practically. It is not desired that ordinary people should think for themselves, because it is felt that people who think for themselves are awkward to manage and cause administrative difficulties. Now remember what we talked about earlier. If somebody from the lower classes happens to be of equal intelligence to the elites, that's where that comes in. Only the Guardians, the Guardian newspaper, that's one of Plato's guardians, in Plato's language are to think, the rest are to obey, or to follow leaders like a herd of sheep. This doctrine, often unconsciously, has survived the introduction of political democracy and has radically vitiated all national systems of education. On perception and the absence of discernment. Our system of education turns young people out of the schools able to read, but for the most part unable to weigh evidence or to form an independent opinion. They are then assailed throughout the rest of their lives by statements designed to make them believe all sorts of absurd propositions, such as that Blank's pills cure all ills, that Spitsbergen is warm and fertile, and that Germans eat corpses. The art of propaganda, as practiced by modern politicians and governments, is derived from the art of advertisement. The science of psychology owes a great deal to advertisers. In former days, most psychologists would probably have thought that a man could not convince many people of the excellence of his own wares by merely stating emphatically that they were excellent. Experience shows, however, that they were mistaken on this. If I were to stand up once in a public place and state that I am the most modest man alive, I should be laughed at. Well, he'd be a bloody liar as well. But if I could raise enough money to make the same statement on all the buses and on onboardings along all the principal railway lines, people would presently become convinced that I had an abnormal shrinking from publicity. If I were to go to a small shopkeeper and say, "Look at your competitor over the way, he is getting your business. Don't you think it would be a good plan to leave your business and stand up in the middle of the road and try to shoot him before he shoots you?" If I were to say this, any small shopkeeper would think me mad. Well, he is mad. But when the government says it with emphasis and a brass band, the small shopkeepers become enthusiastic and are quite surprised when they find afterwards that business has suffered. Propaganda, conducted by the means which advertisers have found successful, is now one of the recognised methods of government in all advanced countries, and is especially the method by which democratic opinion is created. On Rockefeller and the university professors' limits to free speech. In America, at the present day, I doubt if university professors, however eminent, could get employment if he were to criticise the Standard Oil Company, because all college presidents have received or hope to receive benefactions from Mr. Rockefeller. And that applies to all universities right now. And going back to what I said about C2K, giving the computers to children, that's exactly the same. All of it is exactly the same. We're run by farmers, basically, eugenics farmers, and we're just a herd, and the time has come to make sure we're culled. And unless we stand up and say we're not having it, then we will be culled, and we'll deserve it. As Solzhenitsyn said, when they first came knocking on the neighbour's door, we should have been down the bottom of the stairs with saucepans, dustbin lids and anything, and beat them out of the stair, out of the property. And unfortunately, I think it's going to come to that. But I'm not advocating it, but I think it's going to come to that. So anyway, that's the end of it, and we'll be back again next week for more depression and all the rest of it. But there you go. We'll hand over to Alan Taylor Shearer now, and well, good night, and see you next week.